All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Monday, everybody. Hope all of you guys had a great weekend. We've got a jam-packed show for you today. It's Memphis Grizzlies Day. We are moving into one team at a time in our power rankings / season previews. And today we're hitting the Memphis Grizzlies. Off the top, we're going to do just like we've done for every other team. I'm going to talk a little bit about their offseason, talk about just some specific storylines surrounding the team this year, some thoughts that I have about them on both ends of the floor. And then I'll give a little bit of a prediction of what I expect from them this season. And then after that, the way this is going to look a little different than what we did last week. Last week, we were doing 3 teams per show. What we're going to do this week is we're going to do one team. Then we're going to do a film session. I have 18 clips of film we're going to look at from last year in the brief stretches when Ja Morant was available. We're going to talk a little bit about some of these concepts that we talk about in the show, but with a visual element to it. And then at the tail end of the show, I grabbed about a half dozen mailbag questions from you guys from all the videos we did last week. And so that's going to be the cadence for the next 2 weeks now before we start adding in some preseason reactions. Because a week from Friday, we have our first preseason game, right? But for the next 2 weeks, you guys can count on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, a team, a film session for that team, and then a mailbag. That's going to be our format for our next 6 shows. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at @JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts, under Hoops Tonight. And then keep dropping mailbag questions in those YouTube comments so we can keep hitting them throughout the remainder of this year. All right, let's talk some basketball. So we're changing tiers, right? So the first 9 teams that we hit from 20 to 12 were teams that are obviously very good teams, but teams that I don't think have a legitimate championship ceiling. The next 11 teams that we're covering, all I think have a championship ceiling. Now, the top 4 teams, which we're going to be getting to a few weeks from now, those are teams that I think are just traditional bona fide top tier championship contenders. These are teams that check all the boxes you look for in teams that are actively pursuing the championship. They have flaws, but nothing that is like super, super obvious and glaring, right? Whereas the teams from 5 to 11, these next 7 teams that we're hitting, these are all teams that I think have a championship ceiling and legitimately have the talent and firepower necessary, but they have some bigger holes, some bigger issues that make them a little bit more vulnerable to specific matchups. And as soon as you start to need a lot of matchup luck on your way through the postseason, then you start to need some things to break in your favor. Every team gets luck on the way to the championship. Boston was pretty clearly the best team in the league last year, but they still got luck on their way to the championship, right? That's part of the deal. You want luck, but some teams need luck. Like Boston could have won that title last year, even if they faced tougher competition along the way. They just happened to benefit from some luck. If you look at these teams in this tier from 11 to 5, they need that shit. They need a team that kind of has their number to catch a tougher matchup in the second round and get eliminated. Kind of like what happened to Denver last year to Dallas's benefit, right? Like there are a lot of these different things that can break one way or another. An injury here, a bad matchup there that can break your way, that could kind of clear a path for you to rise to the top. That's how I view this group. These are all teams that can win. They just need a lot of luck along the way. So without any further ado, let's get started. Number 11, the Memphis Grizzlies. Not too much turnover in their roster. A couple of guys off towards the tail end of their rotation. Jordan Goodwin, Lamar Stevens, and Zaire Williams are all gone. They added Zach Edey in the draft. They added a bunch of late draft and undrafted type of guys where it's really difficult to see them playing a huge role this year. But obviously the biggest change is the return of Ja Morant. This is Ja Morant, who's missed roughly 80% of his team's last 100 or so games for various reasons, including injuries and off-court stuff. And if he obviously can have a little bit better luck on the injury front this year, it should make a very, very different Memphis Grizzlies team. Now, a simple stat to demonstrate for you guys just how important Ja Morant is to this team. Last season, when Ja Morant was on the floor, the Grizzlies were plus 11 on the scoreboard. They were minus 585 when he was off the floor. They went 6-3 in the 9 games that Ja Morant played in. They went 21-52 in the 73 games that he didn't play in. So just fundamentally alters them from a bad basketball team to a very good basketball team just with that addition of Ja Morant. There's additional injury, bad luck last year. Obviously, as we know, Marcus Smart missed a good chunk of the year. There's a bunch of stuff that went wrong for the Grizzlies, and they're hoping to have a better run through things this year. Now, the upside to Ja having his tough year was a couple things. First of all, the Grizzlies got a high draft pick, right? You got a pick in the top 10. That nets you Zach Edey, right? A player I think will be really effective in some matchups. Yeah, he's going to have some matchups that he'll struggle against. We're going to talk a lot about that today, just like what specific looks Zach Edey can play against versus where he's going to struggle, what Memphis needs to do to actually keep him on the floor as much as possible, right? One of the upsides is the remainder of their kind of like core lineup, right? So like their starting group, that Jaren Jackson, Marcus Smart, Desmond Bane, and Ja Morant, a lot of foot speed. And they can really cover ground in rotation. You guys are going to see some examples of that in our film session today. But like they're fast. And I think that that'll unlock a lot of opportunity to make good use of the good things that Zach Edey brings to the table. But they also found some young talent in their system last year. That's the benefit of getting a lot of reps for players that you don't know much about. You learn a lot about them in a season like last year. So Vince Williams Jr., a big athletic guard that can defend a couple of different types of positions. He shot 41% on unguarded catch and shoot threes last year. Also, just a really active off-ball player. He's a great cutter. He can jump quickly off of 2 feet and dunk in traffic, which makes him a useful cutter. A lot of guards struggle with that. He's great at screening and slipping into the paint where he can finish in traffic. He's just a really solid role player wing. And, you know, those are just hard to find in the league. And anytime you can find one of those, that's a legitimate value add to your roster. And then Gigi Jackson, who hurt his foot, and he's probably going to miss the start of the season, but he's a really interesting and versatile forward. He had 12 20-point games last year, 4 30-point games, and had a career best 44 points in a game against Denver towards the end of the season in April. He's a guy that I could see them using in a bunch of different contexts, but especially in situations where Zach Edey can't play. He's a guy that I think would be really interesting at the 4 next to Jaren Jackson to try to kind of piece that lineup together. So some upside to the fact that Ja Morant missed most of last season. And that's going to be the most interesting lineup conundrum for this team this year. What are they going to do with that 4-5 position, right? Now, I actually really like the 3-guard look for them. I was skeptical about it. 3 guards, it just puts a lot of challenge on everybody to play hard all the time. Because again, when you're not big is there every night, right? Like your size, you're not going to show up to a game in February and not be giant, right? But when you are undersized, you have to make up for a lack of size with activity and foot speed, right? And athleticism and length. And that sort of thing can ebb and flow, right? So a lot of times, like 3-guard looks, I can get a little worried about around the league, especially teams that like have a little bit of like an age-related issue. Golden State, for instance, a lot of 3-guard lineups, but they were a little older, a little slower, and they struggled as a result of that, right? I actually really like this look from Memphis. They got guys with good motors who play hard, and they compete in the physical areas of the game, specifically Desmond Bane and Marcus Smart. Although we're going to talk a lot about Ja Morant on defense today. I didn't watch a ton of Memphis last year for obvious reasons. And going back to watch a bunch of Memphis over the course of my prep for this video, was really, really impressed by Ja Morant on the defensive end of the floor. So we're going to spend some time talking about that later. But those 3 guys with Marcus Smart, Desmond Bane, Ja Morant, all on the floor together. They only played 269 possessions for obvious reasons involving the injuries and stuff with Ja. But according to Cleaning the Glass, in those 269 possessions, they outscored opponents by 10.1 points per 100 possessions. That's really, really good. And they were exceptionally good on defense. They had a 104 defensive rating with that group. As I mentioned, a lot of foot speed. Marcus Smart and Desmond Bane take the two primary point of attack assignments, and they just work their asses off. They deny catches off the ball. They fight guys off of spots and make them catch in places that are a little bit unusual for them. They're great at disrupting rhythm. A lot of times Memphis will just try to switch between those two. So like Bane and Smart will switch any actions with the two best perimeter players, but then they'll like hedge and recover with Ja, and like they'll ask Xavier Tillman to, like, obviously when he was on the team last year, to just kind of chase and navigate around things and just to try to keep Desmond Bane and Marcus Smart on their matchups. But they do a really nice job. Ja does a really nice job in the hedge and recover. Jaren Jackson is good at, obviously, the help stuff around the basket, blocking shots, but he's also good at getting out in space, both on switches, but also blitzing. There's a lot of really good blitz looks that I saw from Memphis over the course of my film session. I've got, I think, 2 examples of it that you'll see in the film session today, but it's not hard to figure out why they defend well. They just got guys that are active and quick, and Marcus and Desmond are both so strong that they can guard up, and they can guard some of these scoring forwards around the league. And so not hard to see why they were an effective defense with that group. But we also know that when Memphis has 3 guards on the floor, they want to go big. Understandably, right? Like if you have 3 guards, you want to have lots of size on the front line to try to balance that out. So they played a lot of Xavier Tillman next to Jaren Jackson last year. But Tillman is a unique player, right? Like he's not the most vertical athlete in the world, but he moves pretty well, is a smart defender, can keep up reasonably well in space, can guard some forwards, right? So like he's a very different type of player than Zach Edey. Zach Edey is going to be a little bit more of a challenge to try to like build that type of scheme around. So the questions will be, there's 2 that I kind of look at here. How often can they actually go with Edey at the 5? And what will they look like when he's not at the 5? So how often they can get away with actually playing Edey at the 5 will depend entirely on how effective their scheme is with him on the floor. So like, for instance, can you keep him out of ball screens? Certain matchups, kind of like what Boston would do with Porzingis, if you can get away with putting your center on the worst forward, not necessarily the center for the other team, but the worst forward for the other team, a guy that doesn't dribble super well, that teams want to kind of tuck away in the opposite side of the floor, then you can keep him out of screening actions, right? That'll prevent him from having to navigate up and down from to the level and back to the basket and to handle super quick guards in space. And in those sorts of situations, if they tuck him in the corner, if they tuck Edey's man in the corner, he can be the low man, right? Where he can kind of help on ball screens, but recover out to the shooter. And then if they actually set screens with that forward will have to pop above the break. That's the issue that we learned from the finals with Dallas and Boston, right? Like because of the paint being clogged by the center, if they use the forward to set the ball screen, he can't roll into the paint because there's just too many bodies in there. So he has no choice but to pop above the break. And as we saw with Boston, if you concede above the break threes to mediocre shooters that have to do it on the move, slipping out of a screen, they don't really make the defense pay very much. So I would imagine that Memphis will try to tuck Zach Edey on a weak defensive forward, specifically with teams that don't have a ton of ball and player movement, and teams that have a weaker forward that's like an iffy above the break shooter and a guy that's not going to run action. In those cases, you can tuck Edey there because then you have Jaren Jackson defend the ball screen and you can have Edey just kind of sitting and help, right? If they do have to put Edey on a center, say, for instance, the forwards are too skilled offensively and so you need to use Jaren Jackson there, then that's where you can have a couple of different looks, right? You can have a low drop coverage. This is where you're asking your guards to chase over the top and you're keeping Edey back at the basket, protecting the rim, right? But that just puts a lot of effort on your guards, a lot of responsibility on your guards to chase over the top, to stay attached so that they can funnel into your big man. But the upside there is you're defending the action 2-on-2. The more you defend the action 2-on-2, the less you're asking Edey to fly around in rotation. The less you ask Edey to fly around in rotation, the better, because that's where I think he could struggle. When you defend actions 2-on-2, there aren't easy wide open kick out passes. When there aren't easy wide open kick out passes, they can't play drive and kick. If they can't play drive and kick, then you're not in rotation. Edey doesn't have to run around as much. Now, we've seen teams like Milwaukee take a slower footed big, a guy like Brook Lopez, and bring him up to the level sometimes against really good pull-up shooters, right? Bring him up to the level And then they have Giannis kind of use his superpower, his ability to do both, like to be able to step over and help on the roll man. Because again, if you bring your center out to the level of the screen, that means the screener's probably going to get behind him. If the screener gets behind him, that's where your low man has to come over and help, right? Well, Jaren Jackson can do that too. I think Jaren Jackson has the ability to get in there to help in low man situations while also recovering out to the corner, kind of like Giannis did for Milwaukee. So those are the three different looks that I could see working for Edey. Again, guarding a weaker forward against teams that don't have a ton of ball and player movement because they'll tuck him away, where Edey can help and recover, or they'll bring him into the action, but who cares because he'll have to pop above the break where he's not going to be able to do anything anyway, right? Or in ball screen coverages, low drop or high drop, just depending on what the matchup looks like. But I think they're going to be able to use him as long as, one, they're not playing super fast teams that kill in transition, teams like Sacramento, teams like Oklahoma City, teams like Indiana. Like those are the kinds of teams that are going to get in a foot race up and down the floor and cause Edey some problems. And then teams with a lot of ball and player movement that flow side to side and ask Edey to guard lots of action and to make lots of decisions and to defend a lot in space. Those are teams that I think can cause Edey some issues. But against most of the teams in the league, I think they're going to be able to get away with putting him in one of those defensive situations that I talked about earlier. But he's going to bring so much to the offensive end of the floor. And that's the main reason, too, you got to look at it here is like even in situations where you're losing some on the defensive end of the floor, he's going to bring a lot offensively. He's going to set really good screens that are going to get Ja Morant going downhill. He's going to catch and finish everything around the rim. At Purdue, Zach Edey shot 45% on hooks, 64% on layups, 76% at the rim overall. That's really good. He's going to get a bunch of offensive rebounds on plays where Ja Morant challenges the rim protector and misses layups. He's a good free throw shooter. He's got a back to the basket game. And this is what I like about the concept of having him with Jaren Jackson. Jaren Jackson had another monster year as a post player last year. He made our high volume list. There are 18 players in the NBA that attempted at least 250 post ups. And Jaren Jackson got 1.07 points per possession, which ranked 7th out of those 18 players. So like an upper half high volume post up player in the league last year, Jaren Jackson shot 49% on hook shots. Like, we're going to show you a couple of clips from a game against the Pelicans this year where Jaren Jackson basically iced the game in overtime, just going to work in the post. And so if he's getting the best post defender, Edey could get some really favorable matchups. Edey's going to get some favorable matchups. There's going to be some situations where he draws a defender in a switch, and they're going to be able to throw him the ball, and he's going to be able to play with his back to the basket, get to that left shoulder hook and pass out of double teams and make a lot of really good things happen. I think it's going to be a positive fit in Memphis. I know there's some concerns, and there are going to be some nights where you're like, whoa, this guy just can't play. But I think more often than not, he's going to be a positive impact for Memphis. Now, when Edey can't play, where do you go from there? Well, Brandon Clark rejoined the team towards the tail end of last year, looked more or less like Brandon Clark. That could be an option. GG Jackson, although he's injured to start the year, I like him as a big athletic forward that can also knock down 3-point shots. Santi Aldama, though, ironically, was their statistically best look last year next to those four guys. He played 43 possessions alongside Jaren Jackson, Marcus Smart, Ja Morant, and Desmond Bane. They were plus 10 net rating grade on both ends of the floor. Again, really small sample. That's like barely not even a half of a game. But in those minutes, they looked pretty good with Santi Aldama. Santi just brings an offensive skill element, a spacing element to it. Again, this was a team that their one big Achilles heel in the last couple of years has been spacing, right? Like this was a bottom 5 spot up efficiency team, not just last year when everyone was hurt, but the previous year as well. Teams pack the paint, teams test Ja Morant's ability to make kick out passes and guys' ability to capitalize on that. Santi Aldama in his growth over the last couple of years has given them a really good option there. But again, in those situations, you're not as big, you're not as athletic, but you have more of that offensive skill in those situations. I really like what this team looks like offensively with the 3 guards. Marcus Smart, he has a little bit of the Dylan Brooks, like every once in a while, Marcus Smart will take a really bad shot or co-opt a possession he shouldn't take. But Marcus Smart offensively is just on another stratosphere as a dribble, shoot, pass decision maker than Dylan Brooks was, right? And so like I actually love his fit there. He makes really quick decisions. He's a gifted playmaker, and he's not afraid to be aggressive if that's what the situation calls for. And I thought the best indicator of this was the Grizzlies were an excellent clutch team last year when Ja Morant was playing. They went 3-1. They were really solid on both ends of the floor. They had a 115 offensive rating and 94 defensive rating. They were plus 21 per 100 possessions in clutch situations last year with Ja Morant on the floor. They really one of the things you'll notice is on the large sample for this Memphis team, they're a little rudimentary in what they do. Like they freelance a lot. The vast majority of their possessions, you'll just see either Ja or Desmond or Marcus just run some sort of like two-man game on one side of the floor, and they'll just kind of play basketball out of that. They don't run up the floor and run sets very often in the large sample. Like Ja will just come up and run a cleared side ball screen. Desmond Bane will dribble up the floor, do a give and go with Jaren Jackson or Xavier Tillman on the wing just to start the possession. Or Marcus Smart will dribble up the floor and just start backing his man down in the post until a second defender comes over, and then they'll just play basketball out of that. It's pretty rudimentary. But at the end of games, Taylor Jenkins really kind of strangles control of the offense and starts to get them to run sets. And they run a lot of horns, a lot of three-man action. And this is where Marcus Smart being in there helps a lot. Because what they'll do is they'll have Marcus Smart as that third offensive player in the action. So instead of just a ball screen with Ja Morant and a big, they'll include Marcus Smart in that action because he inevitably ends up getting open. And then from there, he's really good at playing advantage basketball. Marcus Smart is a guy that if you leave him wide open, he can hit the three, but he's really good at driving closeouts and making that next pass. And so they would set like the horn sets up where Ja Morant would come off of like a Tillman screen, and then they would have a second screening action with Marcus Smart. And then they would kick back to Marcus Smart, who would then rip through, and they'd have Desmond Bane on that side of the floor. So the guy that's getting the first read from Marcus Smart is Desmond Bane. Desmond Bane is deadly on the catch. He's one of the better high, like, difficulty closeout attackers in the league, meaning like, obviously he can knock down the open three. Obviously he can hit one dribble pull up, but he also, if you give him a hard closeout, he can hit some really advanced pro scoring moves in the mid range to get to decent looks. And so that makes him really hard to guard in the clutch. There was a sequence against the Pelicans in a clutch game. We're going to go over it in our film session where they just spammed Horn's chest. So they would have Ja Morant at the top of the key, Marcus Smart at the left elbow, Xavier Tillman on the right elbow. Ja would dribble off Marcus Smart, and then Marcus Smart would come off Tillman, and Ja Morant would work downhill and try to see if he could get into the lane, but then he'd swing it back to Marcus. Marcus would rip through the closeout, and they'd keep Desmond Bane in that corner, so he was benefiting from that attention that Marcus Smart was bringing. They play a really, really good brand of basketball on both ends of the floor when things get tight. I really enjoyed watching them. I think it's going to be an interesting team that has a pretty high ceiling this year. There like a couple other things you'll see. They will run sets off ball for Bane sometimes. Like they'll bring the ball up the floor and Bane will just come off of like some sort of wide pin down so that he can come catch around the elbow and look to shoot. They'll usually run a set in a dead ball situation, usually like a 5-out action, something like a Chicago or something like that, where it's just a pin down into a dribble handoff. But again, during the large portion of the game, it's a lot of freelancing, but they get really deliberate about their execution in crunch time, which is what good basketball teams do. I was really impressed by their defense, though. Again, as I mentioned earlier, Marcus Smart and Desmond Bane, they just work so hard on the ball. Marcus Smart usually takes the toughest matchup, but both guys are capable of guarding bigger, stronger forwards, so they can switch those sorts of things. They deny, they force guys off of their spots. They do a really nice job there. But again, I want to just shout out Ja Morant. By far, the most shocking thing to me as I was watching the film today was like Ja Morant just competes his ass off on the defensive end of the floor and does his job. Is he a guy that's going to guard at the point of attack and chase over the top of screens and be a shutdown defensive guard? No. Is he a guy that's going to be like a anchor to your defense? No. But again, what you need from star guards is not all defense level contributions. You just need them to not hurt your overall team concept, right? what that usually means is when they relentlessly attack you, which they will, and teams still do that. They try to attack Ja Morant at the end of games. But all he has to do is prevent the switch while also preventing his man from getting an open look. That is usually a hedge and recover. That requires foot speed and just commitment to those details. Ja did a really nice job last season showing out, stopping those that ball handler from turning the corner and then recovering out to the shooter. I want to give you guys a much more detailed example of that when we get to our film session. So I'm going to wait for right now. But he also had some really good on-ball possessions when he got forced into switches. And if Ja Morant's going to compete like that defensively, they could be a top 10 defense this year. And if they're a top 10 defense this year, sky's the limit for this group. I think they're going to be really good. I think Ja Morant has a legit superpower. He's incredibly difficult to deal with one-on-one. His short-range scoring is one of my favorite things to watch in the league right now. Like, it's not about like getting to these nifty 15-foot pull-up jump shots. It's just he wants to get really, really quick first, like that first step dribble penetration going to his left. And then he wants to just plant that foot hard right around like 6 or 7 feet from the basket. And then instead of trying to go through everybody at the basket, he just kind of pops up off the ground and leans back a little bit and shoots that little floater over the top. And he's just deadly with it. He was 13 for 20 on floaters last year in his small sample size. That's 65%. Like, that is a really, really useful go-to scoring move. They have all sorts of skill and playmaking around him to capitalize on the attention he draws. I think the Marcus Smart fit makes a lot of sense. I think they're going to be a top 10 defense this year. Really, it just comes down to how good they're going to be offensively against the best defenses in slow down situations. I think they're going to win a ton of regular season games, though. I would be personally surprised if they didn't finish above the plan. My main concerns are health. Like we talked about earlier, Ja Morant just missing so much time. He needs to be available. This team needs him. And then 2, that half-court defense when they face elite defenses in the playoffs. They've been a bottom 5 spot-up team 2 years in a row. Teams are going to pack the paint and try to dare Ja Morant to pick them apart with the pass. Obviously, they've struggled with that in the past, but we haven't seen that with Marcus Smart in the picture yet. And I liked what I saw in the small sample in the regular season last year. So I think this team is really good. I think they have a legitimate championship ceiling. They're at the bottom of that list for me right now. And most of that is I just haven't seen enough of them compared to some of the teams that are above them. But this team has the sky's the limit for this team. I'm excited to see what they can achieve this year. All right, let's get into some of the film. TD Tutty taking it to the house, in for 6, whatever you call a touchdown. One thing's for sure. Touchdowns matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. On the ground, in the air, from the special teams or defense, we don't care how they score them. We want to bet on touchdowns, and DraftKings Sportsbook is delivering. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like picking a player to score a touchdown or how many TDs will be in a game. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. The game I have my eye on this week is Ravens-Cowboys. I think both teams need that game badly. I'm a Cowboys fan too. Very predictable start to the season for the Cowboys, but I'm really, really excited for this weekend. Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. That's code HOOPS for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. You know, whatever your vibe, it's a Camry vibe. That's the reason the Toyota Camry has been America's best-selling sedan for the past 22 years. And the all-new Camry takes it to a new level. With a 4-mode drive switch, you're in total control of your ride. I mean, there are Hall of Fame point guards who don't have this level of control. And the Camry's got flash to match. We're talking available 19-inch multi-spoke alloy wheels and chrome dual-tipped exhaust. I mean, this is a seriously good-looking car. And the all-new Camry's got the comfort to go with the looks. Standard dual-tone automatic climate control will have you and your passengers right in their comfort zone. This is the complete package. There are no weaknesses in the Camry's game. You don't see that often on the court or on the road. And because every all-new Camry is a hybrid, it has difference-making fuel efficiency with up to an EPA estimated 51 miles per gallon combined. Whatever your vibe, it's a Camry vibe. Learn more at toyota.com/Camry. Okay, so our first clip is an example of some of the off-ball action they run for Desmond Bane. So, like, again, as I talked about earlier, for the most part, so many of their possessions are just going to start with Ja Morant bringing the ball up the floor and just Xavier Tillman setting up ball screen. Marcus Smart would clear the side. They would like just play advantage basketball off of a simple action to start the possession. When they run stuff in the half court and the meat and potatoes of the game, it's usually an off-ball action for Desmond Bane. So here's an example of that. And as you can see, it's very simple. All they're doing is they're running Desmond Bane off of a little screen from Tillman here. So he's going to like loop back around Tillman this way, right? But if you watch, you can actually see Emmanuel quickly jump it. He jumps way through this gap here. And as a result, Desmond Bane's able to back cut it. And when he back cuts it, Ja Morant hits him with a really nice left-handed pass. Look at this left-handed pass from Ja. Hits him in the pocket. And even though RJ Barrett makes his rotation, his stance is open. So Desmond Bane's able to get into his body and just shield him with his left arm there and finish. But that's an example of an off-ball set that they'll run for Bane. Here's an example of just your classic flow offense that Memphis will run again. So here we go. Look, we're just dribbling the ball off the floor. We're not going to run a set. Let's just throw the ball to Ja. We're going to throw the ball to Ja. Now we're going to clear the side. Now we're just going to run a ball screen. So again, like this is the way they play for the most part over the course of the regular season in the meat and potatoes of games. They just play two-man game and then just try to play off of that. Here we're going to see they kind of ice the coverage. So they're kind of funneling him towards the sideline. One of the ways to beat ice is mid-range pull-up shooting. You're going to see Ja Morant just hit a little step-back jump shot here on the baseline. Alrighty. This is another example of off-ball action for Desmond Bane. Let's fast forward here a little bit. We're going to swing the ball to Ja. Now we're going to run this off-ball action. Oh, this is our ball screen again. We got repeated. My bad, guys. Let's get back to our off-ball action. So here we go. As you can see, we have Ja Morant here. Desmond Bane's starting on the left wing. Xavier Tillman's going to go set a screen. As he sets that screen, Desmond Bane gets that little bit of separation, gets to his spot here at that right elbow, and he's one of the best mid-range pull-up shooters in the league. Just gets his lift and takes off. Here's an example of some of the freelance offense that Desmond Bane will run. So again, we got a typical half-court possession here. No advantage, nothing in transition. We're not running a set. We're just clearing the side. So Marcus Smart's going to clear the side. Desmond Bane's just going to throw the ball to Tillman. And then he's going to cut hard. Again, that's another way to counter ball pressure too. Instead of dribbling against the ball pressure, just pass it and cut. It still functions just like a ball screen. Watch. As he comes off, now we have two on the ball and Tillman's rolling into space. There's a little bit of a off-ball action here. As you can see, Ja Morant and Santi Aldama are setting like a double-wide pin down for Marcus Smart. That brings these two guys a little bit late in their help rotation so Tillman can get all the way to the basket and finish. This is a little detail in basketball that is so underutilized around the league. But if you run off-ball action, it makes it harder for guys to help. Look at what these guys are doing. All of these guys, Gary Trent, Emmanuel Quickly, and I think that's Siakam, they're all keyed in on this little off-ball sequence. See, Ja's pointing at Santi. He's like, let's go set this screen. This is just freelance basketball. This isn't even a set. It's literally freelance basketball. He's pointing at him to screen down. They run him off. As a result, these guys are just slow to get into the lane on their tag, and Tillman gets a layup. Here's another example of freelance basketball in the form of just a Marcus Smart post up. So we're going to let's fast forward a bit here. Just dribbling the ball up the floor. We're going to pass the ball over here to Marcus Smart. Why don't we just post up? Okay. Like, everybody get out of the way. We don't need to run a set. Just get out of the way. We're getting in the lane. Marcus Smart identifies that relocation there from Conchar. Watch his Conchar after he makes the pass. He cuts through. So he cuts through the lane. Now it's tougher for Scotty Barnes to keep an eye on man and ball. And look at Scotty Barnes. Scotty Barnes leaves Conchar to double team Marcus Smart. Marcus Smart throws the bounce pass. That forces RJ Barrett to rotate and help. Now Santi Aldama gets an open look. He travels. They end up calling a travel here. But that's a really good closeout opportunity for Santi Aldama without really having to run offense, just by just throwing the ball to Marcus Smart and letting him post up. So as you can see, like, it's a lot of really simple and easy basketball in the meat and potatoes of the game. Like, two-man game with Ja Morant, two-man game with Desmond Bane. Let's post up Marcus Smart. Soon as we get some sort of advantage, let's play out of it and go from there. With the other additional detail of some smart off-ball cutting and relocation, as well as the off-ball screening action like we saw in the Desmond Bane sequence. Here's an example of them running a set on a sideline out of bounds. And in this case, it's Chicago action, which ends up getting a good look, I believe, for Desmond Bane. So this is textbook Chicago action. Chicago action is just a pin down into a dribble handoff. So all you're going to do is have your center at the top of the key. As the first screener screens down for Desmond Bane, it's going to flow into a dribble handoff. As a result, it generates a wide open three for Santi Aldama on the weak side wing. You can kind of see how it develops here. As Santi sets that first screen, RJ Barrett has to switch it. Actually, it doesn't switch. That's my bad. You have Jakob Poeltl has to show high. The reason why Jakob Poeltl is showing high here is as Desmond's coming off the dribble handoff. Watch this. Schroeder's trailing the play. So if Poeltl's not here, Bane's going to curl or he's going to get a decent look at a jump shot. But because Poeltl has to show high, now RJ Barrett has to stop the roll. If RJ Barrett stays out on Santi Aldama, then Tillman's going to roll into the paint and Bane can throw that pass over the top. But because RJ Barrett has to tag Tillman, because Poeltl's up at the level, Santi Aldama is going to get a wide open catch and shoot three. That's a simple three-man action, Chicago action on a sideline out of bounds that generates a wide open three. Santi Aldama just brings a really nice offensive skill element to the game for this group. I'm going to be looking at this entire crunch time sequence between the New Orleans Pelicans and the Memphis Grizzlies. I'm going to be looking at some stuff on both ends of the floor. As I talked about earlier, they were 21 points positive per 100 possessions in clutch situations with Ja Morant last year. Really good on both ends. So we're going to be talking about both. So we're starting, once again, you're going to see every screening action is going to include Ja Morant because they were looking to attack Ja quite a bit. We have Marcus Smart on the ball. Look at this like ball denial from Marcus Smart. Watch how Marcus Smart from the catch is just in Brandon Ingram's jersey, making him catch further out and making him uncomfortable. This is a situation where Brandon would like to come off clean on the catch here, but instead he's forced him into his catch almost 35 feet from the basket, right? From there, we're going to get a ball screen with Valanciunas. But this is the beauty of Jaren Jackson. He can come out and guard in space. One of the things I thought was interesting, though, and this is something that I want to see a lot from Memphis this year, especially when they're playing against stars that are in a good groove and causing them problems. It's an advantage if you can force the ball out of the stars' hands. This is where your speed and rotation can be really helpful. Marcus Smart's going to double team. So Marcus Smart comes out. Now we're just double teaming the ball. Imagine any superstar here that we just don't want him to have a catch. You double team the basketball, you force him to get rid of it. Look at the spacing, though. Xavier Tillman splitting the difference. Ja Morant splitting the difference. Desmond Bane is keyed in on CJ McCollum. So as a result, there's not an obvious read for Brandon Ingram to make. He ends up making a read to Zion. But by the time Zion catches, there's a rotation from Ja. Ja comes over. And now there's 3 on the shot clock. And so Zion has to go quickly, but this is no longer an easy 1-on-0 generated from a double team. Zion has to go over big, strong Xavier Tillman, who forces him into a really tough left-handed shot over the top. And they end up getting a stop. Really good defensive possession there. I like that. I like their 2 on the ball look because of their ability to rotate. I want to see them do more of that this year. Here's an example of Jaren Jackson attacking in transition off of this. He ends up getting a kind of a cross match in transition against Jonas Valanciunas, who had typically been guarding Tillman. He ends up getting him in space and just going right at him and getting to the basket and drawing a foul. Notice when he kind of gets downhill, watch Jonas Valanciunas immediately get out of position on Jackson's left-hand side. So as he makes this aggressive move, boom, he takes this like little shuffle step over to the right, and then all Jaren has to do is go to that classic low gather that you see those guards do, where you just take the ball low and through, and he gets raked across the arms and ends up getting 2 free throws out of it. Here's another clutch defensive possession. Ja Morant had been hedging and recovering on most of these actions, but on this case, he actually gets caught in a switch and does a really nice job on CJ McCollum. So here comes Trey Murphy. He sets the screen. This had been a hedge and recover. Now Trey's going to screen and slip out of it, but Desmond Bane ends up staying. They end up switching. Now Ja Morant's on CJ, and watch Ja Morant do a really nice job one-on-one beating CJ to the spot and forcing him to pick up his dribble. Really nice defense there from Ja. Now Desmond Bane, once again, all keyed up off the ball, stays attached to Trey Murphy. Attached, forces him into a tough step back three, which he airballs, but just an unlucky kind of bounce there. Like Jaren Jackson is inside position. Xavier Tillman is inside position. If that ball gets on the rim, they probably get the rebound. But because of where Jonas was, he ends up getting the offensive rebound, and he ends up getting a goaltending call here on Ja Morant. But another nice defensive effort there from Ja on the backside, too. Here's an example of that action that I told you guys about them spamming at the tail end of these games. This is Horn's chest. So let's get up here. A little wrinkle, too. Instead of having the wing start up high in Horns, they had the guys that stay at the elbow. Instead of having them start up high, they had them start down low and then flash high. And they do that. They do that to get these guys in trail position instead of on the top side. Now, so Marcus Smart's going to set the first screen, right? First screen. Now Xavier Tillman sets the second screen on Marcus Smart. That's Horn's chest, right? So Marcus Smart is actually open earlier, but Ja Morant's exploring to see if he can score on Trey Murphy here. But as he comes off, Jonas Valanciunas is in help. Ja Morant ends up making the kick-out pass to Smart. Now look at CJ McCollum. This whole sequence, CJ McCollum's getting back screened, so he's out of position. Now he's still looking at Ja. Here comes the pass. Look at where CJ's head is. This is just really hard to play defense like this because of the screening action. Now he's out of position. He closes out hard to that left-hand side, and Marcus Smart just beats him with a simple rip-through move. But the entire design of the possession is to make it so that when Marcus Smart attacks this advantage, it's Desmond Bane that's in that corner waiting for the kick out. So again, if we watch Marcus Smart on the catch here, let's go back to the beginning really quick. Desmond Bane is in this corner deliberately to be the beneficiary of this action. Marcus Smart sets it. We get the back screen from Tillman. Takes Ja a minute to get it there, but he does eventually get it there. When he gets it there, Marcus Smart, just simple rip-through move. Boom. Draws Brandon Ingram. Desmond Bane, wide open corner three. Beautiful offense from the Memphis Grizzlies. And again, that's a totally fundamentally different action if that's Dillon Brooks instead of Marcus Smart, right? Just the way that's guarded, the way the whole thing comes together, and the way that tic-tac-toes into an open three, it's just going to end in a higher quality shot far more often with Marcus Smart as that kind of like in-between fulcrum than it would be with Dillon Brooks. Here's another really good defensive possession. Here's another example of a hedge and recover from Ja. So we're going to get Trey Murphy setting the screen and slipping out. So Ja Morant is just going to briefly show his face. Boom. Why does he do that? So that if Trey Murphy does screen or if Brandon Ingram does try to turn the corner, he runs into Ja instead, right? But then watch Ja immediately bail out of it. Now he's back into his help and recover situation. So if Brandon had thrown that pass to Trey Murphy, Ja's in position to rotate and recover. Marcus Smart, physical defense on the ball. As soon as Brandon tries to turn back, Ja kind of stunts at him, forces him to go back to that right-hand side. Now he gives up the basketball. Now he's complaining at the refs. That's how you know you're playing good defense, when the dude starts complaining at the refs. CJ McCollum goes for a hard rip through move on Desmond Bane, but he's just all over it, swallows it up, and blocks the shot. I saw so many really impressive defensive possessions from this group when I was watching film today. I'm really, really excited about what this team can be on the defensive end this year. We're just going to get a simple ball screen here. I love the way they disguise this, though, right? So it's kind of set up. If you look where Jonas Valanciunas is, it's kind of set up as if the ball screen's coming towards the middle. But Tillman's going to kind of reverse this on him by sprinting around and actually screening on CJ McCollum's right-hand side. This forces Jonas to close out hard to the level of the screen over there, right? Watch how hard Jonas has to come up. So because he has to come up that hard, it's really hard for him to change direction back going the other way. So Ja Morant's actually able to split it because of how far out Jonas Valanciunas comes. Now it's dead to rights. Gets into the lane, draws the foul. That's Ja's superpower right there for you. Now, here's another example of a blitz that works out really well because of the rotation in the overall foot speed of this lineup. So here comes, we're setting a double ball screen here. Again, 3-man actions are a little bit more complicated. We have Bane on the ball. We have Smart on Ingram. We have Jaren Jackson on Jonas Valanciunas. Jaren Jackson comes out. Smart chases. Now we're blitzing, right? We're in this blitz, but look at how we're splitting the difference here. Tillman is splitting the difference between Zion and Jonas. Ja's splitting the difference between Trey Murphy and Jonas Valanciunas. Now we're in rotation. We end up making this pass to Zion. Zion's not a three-point shooting threat. Ja stunts. Look at that little stunt step there, and then he recovers back out. And now he's playing the passing lane, so Jonas can't make the kick-out pass. And now Jonas has to go on Tillman. The whole thing's dead. So we're going to watch that in full speed again, but watch how quickly they rotate out in a blitz where you put 2 on the ball, suddenly turns into a non-advantage for the offense. Let's watch it here. So first of all, notice that instead of asking Desmond to chase through the first screen, Marcus Smart switches. Any action that involves Bane and Smart, they've been switching. And I think that's really smart. He comes out. Now we're blitzing. We're splitting the difference. Notice, too, Desmond Bane is denying the catch. As I talked about in our original segment, Smart and Bane both do such a good job of ball denial and forcing guys off of their spots. Quickly rotate out of it. Boom, rotate. Jaren Jackson's back. Jaren Jackson gets back to Zion, so now Zion's not open. Nobody's open. As a result, now we have Brandon Ingram doing a rip-through move on Desmond Bane. Watch Marcus Smart. Digs down. Boom, steals. We're going the other way. Marcus Smart actually gets an and one on that sequence. Here's another example of Horn's chest. This time it was well defended, though. So again, it's reversed. So Marcus Smart's on the opposite elbow this time. Ja Morant comes off Marcus Smart, comes off of Tillman. And it's really well defended, right? Herb Jones is kind of sinking down into the lane. Jonas Valanciunas is off the floor now. The Pelicans have gone small, so they're just a little bit quicker in rotation. Nothing's open. Really well defended. Okay, now what? This is where Ja Morant has his superpower that we talked about earlier, his ability to make that hard left-hand drive and then just to elevate off the bounce. Watch him just make a really aggressive dribble move. And then just once he gets into his chest, he's not trying to go through you. He's just trying to lean back into that floater. And he's shooting that at 65% last year, which is obviously off the charts good. Will he shoot 65% on it this year? Probably not. But I bet you he gets over 50%, and that is going to make him a pretty damn efficient scorer. This was a possession where New Orleans got a bucket, but this was another really well-defended possession. Notice here we're going to get another switch from Marcus Smart and Desmond Bane. So watch. We have a double wide pin down here. Smart and Bane are going to communicate a switch. As he goes through, look at Marcus Smart says, I got him. He's coming through. I got him. You stay out on Ingram. Okay, cool. Boom. We're back out on Ingram. Action is shut down. Nothing's open. Now Herb Jones is turning to the other side. Ja Morant does a nice job denying the ball. That forces Trey into a back cut. Nothing's open. Nothing's open. Nothing's open. Look at this ball denial from Marcus Smart. Denying the catch. making it so that Herb Jones doesn't know what to do. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? They end up just throwing it to Brandon Ingram, and he bails him out with this like ridiculous fadeaway. Watch this fadeaway from Brandon Ingram. But that is phenomenal defense. Once again, shoehorned by Desmond Bane and Marcus Smart just being a pain in the ass on the ball. Now, here's at the end of the game where Jaren Jackson started taking over. This time, Ja Morant ends up getting blitzed. So Marcus Smart screens. It's not a blitz, it's just a double team. So we get the double team. As a result, Jaren Jackson ends up flashing over here, and he gets a one-on-one with Zion, drives at him on his left, gets cut off, spins back. Zion overplays that left-hand drive, and he spins off and hits the right-handed shot off the glass. Very, very good post-up season for Jaren Jackson last year. And then on the next possession, they actually take Zion out of the game. So they're super small now. As you can see, they have Dyson Daniels, Herb Jones, Brandon Ingram, I believe that's Trey Murphy. That's Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, Dyson Daniels, Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum. So all really small. They end up just going to Jaren Jackson. Jaren Jackson has one of the best left-handed hooks in the game, just gets into the lane, hits that left-handed hook across the lane. A nice like thing that they can go to at the end of games, right? Like you ball screen attack them in space and cause all these problems that forces them to go small. At which point, then you can attack them through the post with Jaren Jackson. Here's that one last defensive possession for you guys to look at. Another great hedge and recover from Ja. Watch, Zion's going to come over, call for the screen from Trey Murphy. Watch the hedge. Boom, hedge. That stops the drive. That's the important part. If he doesn't hedge, Zion's whipping down the lane like this and causing all sorts of problems. He hedges, and then he gets back. He gets right back to the shooter. And now it's Xavier Tillman on an island with Zion into all this traffic, really strong help. Watch Marcus Smart. Marcus Smart's guarding Brandon Ingram. Boom, gets his feet set outside the charge circle, draws the charge. I was so impressed by Memphis's defense in these situations. It was a really, really fun film session to learn about that team. So yeah, that's it for the Memphis Grizzlies today. Hopefully you guys learned a little bit more about them heading into the season. Let's get into our mailbag quick, and then we'll get out of here for the day. Hi, Jason, Warriors fan here. You and JJ Redick are my go-to guys for quality hoop content, and I appreciate every bit of effort you put into the show. That's very, very kind of you to say. You mentioned 3 things the Warriors need to do to get back into the middle of the pack contention this coming season. I agree with all 3. Pods, JK, and Curry. I'm surprised that you didn't mention Wiggins. I believe he's a great swing factor in our front court and can affect the game on both ends when he's fully locked in and ready to go. What impact do you think an improved and motivated Wiggins can bring to the team? Thanks in advance. Obviously, Andrew Wiggins, the version of him that we saw in 2022, brings a ton to the team. He was one of the best perimeter defenders in the league that year. I still think he's really good in that area. That hasn't been the primary area of his decline, but he brought that to the table. But he was a good 3-point shooter that season. Most importantly, he brought like legitimate scoring bursts. Like he was getting like, it was not uncommon for Andrew Wiggins to end with 20, 22 points in a game just by hitting those open threes, but also driving closeouts. And then he was doing a lot of semi-transition attacking, like getting into the lane and knocking down that little floater in the lane that he would make when he would just rip through, take the contact, and then elevate and knock down a shot. Wiggins was really good in that season. And there's no doubt that if he was that version of himself again, it would mean a lot for this Golden State Warriors team. Here's the problem. When someone tells you what they are in a large sample, don't fall for the small sample. So like, for instance, Andrew Wiggins was really, really good in 2022, but he's been rough since, and he was rough before that. He's been in the league a long time now. And so I'm kind of the opinion that that was the outlier and that this is more or less the real Andrew Wiggins. And so with that being the case, like obviously we're all rooting for that. It just seems somewhat unlikely. And I think it would be, I think we're setting ourselves up for disappointment if we count on Andrew Wiggins being that type of player again. Although I don't always agree, you are one of the few that takes thoughtful and thorough approach to analyzing basketball. My question, Jimmy Butler has recently been compared by another YouTuber to LeBron James in terms of style of play. Given how James and Curry played during the Olympics and the rumors about Butler getting traded with the Warriors as a possible destination, how do you see the fit of Butler and Curry, and do you believe that would make them a title contender this year? Note, of course, this question assumes that Butler has a similar skill set / playing style as James, and that the James Curry fit in the Olympics can be replicated even if the talent is a tier below. So I don't actually see too much of a similarity between LeBron and Jimmy Butler. I would almost look at Jimmy Butler if he were to play for the Warriors as like a juiced up version of Andre Iguodala, right? Like Andre Iguodala brings a lot of the similar type of like when he was in his prime, or I shouldn't say in his prime, but in his prime at the Warriors in that 2015 to 2017 phase. During those years, Andre Iguodala brought like high level playmaking. He was a great connective piece, elite on the ball defense, just like all of these little dirty work things, which we know Jimmy Butler can do and do really well. The big difference is Jimmy Butler can also run action, right? Like you're going to dump the ball into the post to Jimmy and run split action with Steph running off of off ball screens with Jimmy in the post as a scoring threat. That's a real weapon there, right? Just having Jimmy in two-man game with Steph Curry, because Jimmy's going to be guarded by a bigger forward. Steph's going to be guarded by a quicker guard. Jimmy can attack quicker guards in the post. Steph can attack bigger forwards in space, right? There's so much other offensive elements that Jimmy brings to the table, but he could also function when Steph has the ball as like a juiced up version of Andre Iguodala. And so like, I think Jimmy would be a great fit with the Warriors, kind of fits their short-term goals as well of trying to just rebuild a championship caliber roster around Golden State. The thing is that Miami's probably going to be looking for a good amount of talent in return there, and it's just whether or not you can find a deal that actually makes sense. But I think Jimmy would be a beautiful basketball fit with Golden State. The slow-mo praise, meaning Kyle Anderson, the slow-mo praise is justified, but wasn't he just saying that Anthony Edwards had no one on his team that could make a play when the ball was forced out of his hands, and using slow-mo Conley? Conley's a good offensive player, so that's not who I was talking about. Slow-mo Jaden McDaniels, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Rudy Gobert were the main four guys that I had issues with. So here's the thing. I understand what you're saying. There's just a huge difference between being a dribble handoff fulcrum for the Warriors with a bunch of movement shooters, where it's mostly about like hitting cutters and then the ability to attack the rim and make kick out passes in inverted spacing. That's very different than what was happening to Minnesota. What was happening to Minnesota is they were packing the paint, and now it's becoming an issue because Kyle Anderson can't hit shots over the top of the defense. Golden State inverts the spacing because of the fact that guys are coming off these dribble handoffs, guys like Buddy Hield, guys like Brandon Podziemski, guys like Steph Curry, Klay Thompson in the past, they're coming off of those dribble handoffs. It inverts the spacing. So it's not as important for the role players to shoot as it is for them to be able to attack the rim and quickly make decisions in those situations. Very, very different than the issue that Minnesota was having. And so again, Kyle Anderson is the type of player that I actually like in the inverted spacing of Golden State, but I don't like in the system that Minnesota had where the paint was clogged and it was more about the ability to hit shots over the top of the defense. No way Trey Lyles starts, and DeMar hasn't been a 2 for a while now. And we're talking about the Kings. He almost exclusively played the 3 or the 4 for Chicago the last few years. My guess is the starting lineup looks like this. De'Aaron Fox with Keon Ellis, DeMar DeRozan at the 3, Keegan Murray, and Domantas Sabonis. It's possible that that's the direction they go. As you mentioned, DeMar DeRozan has played a lot of 3 at this phase in his career. My issue is if you have DeMar DeRozan at the 3 and Keegan Murray at the 4 with Sabonis at the 5, your overall length and athleticism on your front line is like basement in the NBA. And so it's one of those things where you sacrifice a lot defensively on the glass in those situations. I do love the idea of Keon Ellis guarding at the point of attack. He's just such a natural fit there. And in the universe where you could put Keon Ellis at the 2, DeMar DeRozan at the 3, and like a bigger, stronger forward at the 4, I'd be on board. I won't be surprised if they try that. And that lineup will be very good in some ways. I just worry about the overall size and athleticism if you're running DeMar DeRozan and Keegan Murray at the 3 and the 4. That's pretty damn small and unathletic. Hello, Jason. Always like listening to you when you analyze. As a Knick fan, I have a question about Julius Randle. And that is the playoffs. I felt like last season before he got hurt, I thought he was going to have a good 2024 playoff run, especially when he played alongside OG Anunoby because he was making quicker decisions and not holding onto the ball as long. He attacked mismatches in the post with his strength and speed and has become more of a willing passer. and committed to playing defense. So my question to you is that going into next season, especially with the Knicks having a chance to compete/win a title, do you believe that Julius Randle has a better chance of performing well in the 2025 playoffs since he has OG and now the addition of Mikal Bridges? Appreciate your time and continue to do great work as always. I am actually a huge believer that Julius Randle's game is built to play well in the playoffs. The problem is he consistently is hurt right before he gets there, or in the case of last year, hurt when he's there, right? But Julius is a rhythm player. In order for him to be a useful kind of bully ball forward, he needs to be kind of like really dialed in with that little left shoulder fade that he hits when he kind of bullies his way in and then just kind of leans back and shoots over his left shoulder. Also, just handling the ball, not losing control of it, making good reads, those kick out passes that you're talking about. And what ends up happening is he comes into the league hurt, or comes into the playoffs hurt, and he just is kind of out of rhythm, and he just kind of struggles to be as effective and efficient as he usually is. And he's missing all those threes. He's missing all those short fadeaways. He's not in as good a shape, so he's not defending as well. And it ends up making him look like a bad playoff player. But every single time he's coming into that situation hurt. I don't want to see Julius Randle get into a playoff run where he's played for 3 straight months going into it, and so that he's actually operating like peak Julius Randle at that point. The thing that I like about Julius Randle is when games get ugly and you got a guy who's big and strong and can attack mismatches in the post, that is a huge value in the NBA playoffs. We've just never seen that really fully realized for them because he's always injured when he gets there. So again, I believe Julius Randle can be a useful player for the Knicks. He's just got to be healthy and available, and he's got to be willing with this group, with the shortcomings of their front court. Like Mitchell Robinson's going to be out till December or January. Your backup center spot is really weak right now. Tom Thibodeau never really used Precious Achiuwa at the 5, not very often at least. So it's one of those things where if Julius Randle is going to play a lot in the front court as a 5, like a small ball 5, he's going to have to defend and rebound at a really, really high level. And that's just a lot to ask. And so if he commits to doing all those things, this team has the talent to accomplish great things this year. It's just going to be about whether or not those guys are willing to accept smaller roles. Again, anytime you have lots of talent in the room, everyone's got to really, really be willing to accept roles, or you're going to get diminishing returns. All right, last question. How do you have Miami with 2 top 25 players at 18, but Orlando with 0 top 25 players above them? Well, because those 2 top 25 players includes a guy in Jimmy Butler who is kind of on the downslope and is hurt a lot, right? And has missed significant chunks of the regular season as of late, right? Also, Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero were both in my preliminary list for the top 25. They just didn't actually make the top 25. But I didn't see much of a gap between them and the guys at the tail end of my top 25 list. So beyond that, the Magic have a lot of talent down the roster. They have a lot of really gifted two-way role players, a lot of size, a lot of athleticism. Jonathan Isaac is a weapon. Wendell Carter Jr. is a weapon. Jalen Suggs, one of the best 3-and-D guards in the league. The KCP edition makes them it's a high-level starter upgrade that makes things a lot easier for them. He's also a movement shooter, which is something they haven't had in the past, which will accentuate a lot of their inverted ball screens where Franz and Paolo get a guard to set a screen for them. I just think overall Orlando's a better team. Now, that said, if Miami's healthy and Jimmy Butler's playing like Jimmy, then and we're in the playoffs, that's a different discussion. But heading into this season, looking at it from the context of October all the way through June, at this point, I think Orlando's a little bit of a safer bet. That's all I have for today. One last thing. I've been doing with my buddy Luke reactions to every episode of The Rings of Power. So if you haven't checked that out yet, wherever you get your podcasts under Two Sons Podcast or on YouTube under Two Sons Podcast, you can check out some Rings of Power content. I will be back on Wednesday with another one of these videos. Don't forget to drop mailbag questions. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting the show, and I'll see you next time.